morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Wednesday, 7th May 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is navigating economic challenges and international trade relations amid ongoing trade tensions, particularly with the United States. To counter the effects of U.S. tariffs, China is implementing stimulus measures, such as cutting key policy rates by 10 basis points and reducing the reserve requirement ratio by 50 basis points. Financial regulators are focused on stabilizing capital markets, including expanding schemes that allow insurers to invest in the stock market. The China Securities Regulatory Commission, GSC, is streamlining IPOs to facilitate listings for high-quality firms from overseas in mainland China and Hong Kong, emphasizing a high-level market opening. China is also adding to its gold reserves. Despite agreeing to trade talks with the U.S., Beijing has cautioned against using these discussions to exert undue pressure. Trade talks are scheduled between U.S. and Chinese officials. Uncertainty surrounding tariffs has led to a significant decrease in China-U.S. container shipments following an initial surge. Chinese factories are preparing for a future with potentially reduced reliance on American buyers. Tesla sales in China have declined as consumers increasingly prefer cheaper, tech-laden domestic models. April deliveries from the Shanghai factory dropped nearly 26%. Bide, a rival automaker, is posting gains. Hot, dry weather conditions threaten wheat output in China's major wheat-growing regions. Chinese AI startup DeepSeek has adopted an open-source technical solution from Tencent, leading to a huge speed boost for its AI development. China has signaled a potential levy on India as a warning against cutting deals with the U.S.-China's defense stocks have increased following clashes between India and Pakistan. Keytop seeks to turn China's parking challenges into opportunity. Turning to the United States, the nation is actively engaged in trade negotiations with China, involving officials such as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. These talks follow the escalation of U.S. tariffs on Chinese exports during President Trump's trade war. The U.S. tariff policy and export restrictions to China are creating uncertainty for chip companies like AMD and Supermicro, impacting their businesses and NVIDIA. Mattel, the maker of Barbie dolls, will increase prices on some U.S. toys because 20% of its U.S. sold goods are produced in China and subject to levies. AMD anticipates a $1.50 billion revenue hit due to chip restrictions imposed on sales to China. Investor Paul Tudor Jones anticipates new lows in the stock market, even if President Trump reduces China tariffs to 50% due to deteriorating macroeconomic conditions. In the world of technology, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang views being locked out of China's $50 AI market as a tremendous loss for NVIDIA, which he describes as a Boeing-sized opportunity. Meanwhile, in Morocco, Crown Prince Moulay Hassan met with President Xi Jinping, highlighting Morocco's role as a connector country linked to Europe through its auto sector and trade pacts. The trade war has made Morocco's status precarious. India is currently navigating geopolitical complexities with Pakistan, which has brought India's defense sector into sharp focus and may result in increased military expenditures that could favor local companies. Despite tensions as seen in Operation Sindoor, the Indian stock market demonstrates robustness, with both the Sensex and Nifty 50 showing gains. Positive global trade developments and foreign investments are bolstering investor confidence. However, the National Stock Exchange, NSE, and Bombay Stock Exchange, BISE, have restricted website access from overseas locations to counter cyber threats, a decision made after a joint meeting of exchanges. Economically, Coal India reported a 12.45% year-on-year increase in its Q4 FY25 consolidated net profit and declared a final dividend of $5.15 per share. India has also strengthened its international trade ties through a new trade deal with the UK. The United Kingdom has solidified its alliance with India through a comprehensive trade agreement. This agreement will see India gradually lower its import taxes, with the ultimate aim of achieving tariff-free trade within the next 10 years. The accord was jointly announced by Minister Piyush Goyal and Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. Saudi Arabia is actively pursuing stronger economic and diplomatic partnerships with the United States, focusing on a cooperation agreement for mining and mineral resources. The Saudi investment minister emphasized the U.S.'s innovative capacity and robust financial markets as key drivers for increased investment. A high-profile conference in Saudi Arabia, drawing CEOs from major firms like BlackRock and Citi, and even former U.S. President Donald Trump, aims to further stimulate U.S. investments in the kingdom. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund is making substantial investments, including a $5 billion stake in Live Golf. The financial landscape is also witnessing developments, with Flynas contemplating a $1 billion IPO, and Al Rajhi Bank issuing 5-year sukuk. The kingdom is leading the MENA region in IPO activity, with proceeds totaling $2.40 billion, a 106% increase compared to the previous year. However, the ambitious Neom megacity project has raised environmental concerns, with its climate advisor cautioning about potential alterations to regional weather patterns. In regulatory news, Saudi banks are now prohibited from using WhatsApp for customer communications, reflecting new communication standards. Preparations for the Hajj pilgrimage are underway, with 2,248 pilgrims already en route to Saudi Arabia. In the global energy sector, Saudi Arabia remains a key player, possessing the capacity to influence global oil supply, though fluctuations in demand could present challenges. United States. The U.S. trade deficit soared to a record high in March as businesses and consumers ramped up imports, anticipating President Trump's tariffs. Government data indicates that Chinese imports to the U.S. have subsequently plunged to a 20-year low due to these tariffs, thereby impacting established supply chains. Despite the intended goal of reshoring jobs and boosting domestic industries, Trump's tariff policies are exposing underlying vulnerabilities within the U.S. economy. U.S. stocks saw gains, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, S&P 500, and Nasdaq Composite all increasing ahead of the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell announced on May 7, 2025, that the U.S. Federal Reserve anticipates maintaining current interest rates, citing concerns over unstable inflation. Chinese imports to the U.S. have plummeted to a 20-year low because of U.S. tariffs, which are disrupting supply chains, as reported by government data. Cryptocurrency investors are optimistic about upcoming U.S.-China trade discussions, fueling a rise in Bitcoin's value. Hong Kong stocks are also climbing in anticipation of U.S.-China trade talks focused on de-escalation, which is boosting the Hang Seng Index. Adding to the changing dynamics, a Canadian CEO is circumventing U.S. intermediaries and forging direct connections with China, a strategic move prompted by disruptions from Washington's tariffs. Furthermore, Asia's largest economies have jointly approved an emergency financing mechanism that utilizes the yuan and other local currencies, potentially lessening dependence on the US dollar. Australia. Onhai is set to supply Mitsubishi with electric vehicles for both Australia and New Zealand. First Sentier Investors in Australia has appointed a new CFO and strategy officer. Banks and mining companies are driving Australian shares higher, with National Australia Bank, NAB, exceeding expectations. However, NAB cautioned about potential market volatility arising from ongoing trade tensions, despite its profits surpassing estimates. Asia. As mentioned, Asia's largest economies have given the green light to an emergency financing tool using the yuan and other local currencies, a move that could reduce reliance on the US dollar. Canada. In the latest from Canada, a CEO is bypassing US middlemen and establishing direct trade relationships with China, a strategy driven by the disruptions caused by Washington's tariffs. Russia's financial landscape reveals a widening budget deficit, reaching 1.5% of GDP between January and April. This is largely due to declining oil revenues, hitting a 2-year low, and crude production falling short of OPEC targets in April. To address this, Russia intends to tap into its fiscal reserves to stabilize the 25 budget, notably excluding dividend payments from Gazprom. The car market struggles are also expected to cause a shortfall in scrappage fees. Shifting to security matters, Russia's defense ministry reported intercepting 13 Ukrainian drones near the Moscow region. Simultaneously, drone attacks targeted several Russian regions, igniting fires in Tula, Saransk, and areas near Moscow, leading to flight restrictions around the capital. Russia attributes these attacks and incidents to Ukraine. Turning to the European Union, the bloc remains steadfast in its commitment to eliminate Russian fossil fuels by 2027. However, challenges persist, primarily concerning diversification efforts and potential disagreements among member states. Adding to the pressure, the EU's impending sanctions against Russia will extend to companies operating in Vietnam and Turkey. In Ukraine, the nation is accused by Russia of orchestrating attacks and various incidents within Russian territory. Tragically, a Russian drone and missile strike on Kyiv resulted in the deaths of a mother and her son, underscoring the human cost of the ongoing conflict. South Africa's currency, the rand, saw some volatility, initially declining after a period of gains, before finding stability as the Purchasing Managers' Index hit a balanced point. Despite global tariff concerns, the country's domestic car market is showing resilience. Ford South Africa reported a 9.4% sales increase in the first quarter of 2025, aiding the broader recovery of vehicle sales. Epson is expanding its operations in South Africa, noting shifts in the printing sector. Politically, the Democratic Alliance has put forward a motion of no confidence against the mayor of Johannesburg, while another party is legally challenging new labor equity regulations. More South Africans are participating in stokvels, informal savings groups that are gaining popularity. Offshoring trends are positively impacting growth within South Africa's property market, and Qantas has begun direct international flights to the country. United Kingdom. The UK has solidified a trade agreement with India, anticipating the elimination of tariffs on most goods within the next 10 years. This development occurs against a backdrop of existing US tariff tensions, potentially positioning the UK to navigate trade routes independent of the US. Meanwhile, the FTSE 100 in the UK is enjoying its most extended period of gains, though market experts believe further growth is possible. For the United States, former President Trump has declared that the US does not need a trade deal. This assertion arrives at the same time as the UK and India's trade agreement, which has been established amid US tariff tension. Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukraine has conducted drone strikes on Moscow, targeting areas near the city's international airports, leading to a temporary suspension of operations. These attacks took place in advance of Russia's Victory Day commemorations. Germany witnessed Friedrich Merz elected as Chancellor in a second parliamentary vote. He initially failed to garner sufficient support. News of his election caused German stocks to pay losses. Chancellor Merz is now confronted with a series of complex issues early in his tenure. Simultaneously, German factory orders showed an increase, occurring just before President Trump's anticipated tariff announcements. The tariffs imposed by the US are notably affecting German companies with operations in China. These firms are actively working to lessen the impact. Their strategy involves separating their Chinese operations. This isolation aims to shield them from exposure to US regulations and tariffs. The United States is sending Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and official Greer to Geneva, Switzerland, this week. They will engage in trade negotiations with Chinese counterparts. Switzerland's appeal as an investment hub for diverse sectors could be a factor in discussions. While significant breakthroughs are not anticipated, the meeting suggests a possible improvement in US-China relations. China's economic activity has sparked renewed optimism as upcoming US-China trade discussions and anticipated stimulus measures, potentially including interest rate cuts from Beijing, have fueled gains in Asian stock markets and strengthened the dollar. Turning to Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing, HKX, is experiencing a vibrant period, evidenced by a strong IPO pipeline boasting 120 firms. Further demonstrating confidence in its future, the HKX has approved plans for constructing a new headquarters, building on a record-breaking first-quarter profit. In South Korea, the Korean won saw a notable surge in value. This upward movement mirrored the broader positive trend observed across Asian markets, particularly after a holiday-induced pause in trading activity. South Korea's won saw a boost thanks to easing US tariffs and the rise of the Taiwanese currency, pushing the stock market to a 6-week peak. Inflation in April remained stagnant, hinting at a possible relaxation of monetary policy. Tariffs affecting General Motors, GM, have implications for the South Korean economy, specifically concerning vehicles produced in Korea and exported to the United States. Politically, presidential hopeful Lee Jae-myung has pledged to legalize cryptocurrency ETFs should he win the election. In Seoul, Heineken ran a promotion that gave football enthusiasts control of a local bar. Canada recently saw Prime Minister Mark Carney's first White House visit, where he met with President Trump to address the crucial US-Canada trade relationship. During the discussions, Carney firmly stated that Canada would never be for sale, a clear response to the impact of tariffs imposed by the United States. Adding to the tension, President Trump suggested the potential implementation of pharmaceutical tariffs. Despite these trade-related challenges, Canada's stock market experienced a modest gain, with the S&P TSX Composite Index showing an increase. United States-based TikTok sought to reassure advertisers about its future. This came as a new law threatened a ban in the U.S. executives addressed concerns at a Newfront's presentation. Palantir, a data analytics company, is listed on the Nasdaq market in the United States. Turning to Europe, a European Central Bank survey highlighted a shift in consumer behavior. European consumers are increasingly avoiding American goods and services. This trend is linked to changing views of the U.S., particularly concerning trade tensions during the Trump presidency. United States investors, reacting to tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, reallocated their capital in the European and Japanese markets. Bank of America analysts noted that this shift also boosted cryptocurrencies and high-yield bonds, as the tariffs created headwinds for U.S. market performance. Turning to Japan, the nation is now a member of a newly formed chip alliance alongside the U.S. and Taiwan. A former Japanese minister highlighted Taiwan Semiconductor's pivotal role in this collaboration. Further solidifying ties, Mitsubishi Motors, a Japanese automaker, will source the production of its electric vehicles from an automaker owned by Foxconn, a Taiwanese firm. In Taiwan, Taiwan's semiconductor is viewed as a key component of the developing chip alliance with the US and Japan. Adding to the cross-national collaborations, Foxconn, a company based in Taiwan, will be producing electric vehicles for Mitsubishi Motors, a company based in Japan, through its own automotive manufacturing arm. Pakistan's Karachi Stock Exchange, KAS-A 100, saw a sharp decline during a turbulent trading session, sparked by India's Operation Sindoor and the resulting escalation of tensions. In reaction to the economic uncertainty, Pakistan held an urgent meeting to evaluate the stability of its financial markets and overall economic security during the heightened conflict with India. Europe's financial markets are showing mixed performance as investors anticipate the Federal Reserve's upcoming policy announcement, with some shares declining due to profit-taking activity. Further evolving its sustainability efforts, Euronext is rebranding its ESG initiatives to provide enhanced support for European aerospace and defense industries. Expanding its reach within the digital commerce sphere, Sky Intelligence has acquired Sesame Digital, a company based in France. Meanwhile, Romania is actively taking measures to curb capital flight following recent electoral gains made by far-right political parties. Interest rate policies in Sweden and Norway are anticipated to mirror those of the Federal Reserve, with both countries likely to maintain their current rates. In Spain, defense funds are being redirected to address the growing impacts of climate change. In Qatar, Islamic finance assets have surged to 694 billion rials, or $190.60 billion, in 2024, accounting for 97% of the nation's total financial market. Strengthening international financial ties. The Qatar Financial Centre, QFC, and the London Stock Exchange Group, LZG, collaborated to host the Islamic Finance Forum. Turning to Brazil, a collaborative fund established between the Andes, Brazilian Development Bank, and Financiadora de Estudos has the potential to unlock up to $15 billion in investments targeted at bolstering Brazil's critical minerals supply chain. Despite facing hurdles, Brazil's gaming sector has demonstrated resilience, adapting to identify and capitalize on new growth opportunities. In Singapore, the ambassador conveyed surprise regarding the rapid actions taken by President Trump. Singapore's stock market saw a modest increase, aligning with broader trends observed across the region. Meanwhile, Chinese exporters are strategically diversifying their target markets, including Egypt, as a means to circumvent tariffs and maintain sales to U.S. consumers. Bahrain's finance minister underscored the long-standing and strategically significant partnership between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. In Mexico, Ford has raised prices on vehicles manufactured within the country in response to the impact of tariffs. Thailand is making strategic moves to establish itself as a leading financial center within Asia. Finally, in Israel, Blackstone President Jonathan Gray and his wife Mindy contributed $125 million to Tel Aviv University, the largest donation in the university's history, with the aim of addressing the country's shortage of doctors. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.